Hi, welcome to the best panel you'll experience this whole AWE. No pressure, guys.
Thanks.
Because this is really about my luminaries on the panel here today. So I'll just do a quick introduction of the folks who are here. We have sitting over to my far right, we have Shannon Norrell. We have Ryan Fink. We have Elizabeth Bieniek. And and her fans, stand-up fans. And we have Tom Chestnut, and I'm Rika Nakazawa. Yay. OK, so what we're going to talk about here today is something that is, I think, a topic that is of interest to a lot of folks here, whether you're an enterprise customer or you're a consumer or you're a business owner. Since the dawn of time, well, actually that's not true. Since the dawn of human existence, I suppose, collaboration has been the heart, the heart of how we advance together. And as Mother Teresa said so gracefully, she said, "None of us, including me, ever do great things, but we can all do small things with great love, great AR, great VR, great XR. Together we can do something wonderful." She was really prescient. So what we're going to talk about today is remote collaboration in the age of XR. And we have with us on stage folks from different pockets around that. So you have somebody who had been with a very large enterprise company, HP, for many, many years, is now CTO of a stealth startup. You have a woman who's leading the charge around innovation collaboration with a much vaunted communication collaboration company of Cisco. You have an entrepreneur who's done this a few times around really paving a path forward around how to take old models and bring them into the new, and with Streem. And then you have a gentleman that is responsible for essentially how innovation is going to play out within food safety, for example. So I expect that this panel is going to be very colorful, and I'm also going to leave time at the end for questions. So whether you've come with them already in hand or as they come to you, please expect that we'd love to hear from you and have you also grill our panelists on the stage. So with that, the first question that I'll ask is, if you can share with us, if we were to rewind 5 years and we're on stage here and we're at an innovation conference, not necessarily XR, and people were to ask you about where innovation is going to play a part in, or digital transformation and collaboration, how would your answer have been 5 years ago, whether it's your own personal opinion or the organization whom you represent, and where we are today? And Elizabeth, maybe I can start with you.
Sure. I think the interesting thing about that question is 5 years ago, I probably would have said the same thing I was going to say now of, in 5 years, we will have. And now we're still saying, in 5 years, we will have. There was a comment yesterday in the broader session about as being a slow burn. And that's definitely, I think we're seeing that to be true. But with that, I think we're also a little bit of like the magma beneath the surface. There's been so much momentum and so much potential building up. I think we have still yet to break the surface of that. We're just starting to peek out, just starting to see the tips of the lava, I think, there.
Tom?
I think 5 years ago, we would have looked at this being a lot more handheld-based, tablet-based. I think the whole idea of wearables 5 years ago was just not that, far enough out there that we thought that that was going to be something that is the reality that it is today.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. 5 years ago, I was all in on smart glasses. I'm still as bullish now as I was then. I think there's a lot we can do today with handheld devices. I still think we're limited a bit on the hardware. We were all kind of hoping for a depth sensor from Apple, and Google, bring back your Project Tango. But yeah, I think the space has got some really big players that have come in. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Shannon?
So yeah, I've been thinking about AR for over a decade now. So like every day thinking about it. And 5 years ago, it's been clear to me that this is your AR device to begin with. Everyone has one. They're in your pocket. You have, remember the old Yelp guide? That was like the greatest start for AR. But I think we limited ourselves by not adopting open standards for AR. Not adopt, so everybody's a walled garden. Everybody has their own product, their own apps, their own thing. So if we could collaborate and work together I came up with the idea of this thing called ARML years ago, which is basically augmented reality markup language. It's like everyone knows HTML, right? Why can we not mark that as a div right there and put this video playing on that physical object? Like open standards that will help us all as an industry as opposed to doing these walled garden projects. Anyway, that's what I would have said 5 years ago. It didn't pan out, but it's not too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you think are the drivers that's enabling it to now, as you said, Elizabeth, to break through the surface? Like, what are the key pain points that you see your customers facing, compounded with technologies that have now advanced far enough that we feel like there's going to be a tipping point? Can you talk a little bit about some of those key use cases? Maybe Ryan, if you want to start.
Yeah, especially for us, we're dealing with consumers kind of on both sides of the coin. We're dealing with home service professionals who traditionally don't like technology, and we're dealing with consumers who are more used to technology, but it just has to work. So I think technology, or Apple and Google making this investment to get in with their AR kit and AR core has helped push the whole space forward.
Tom?
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing. I think the hardware advancements over the last several years have been significant to get more uptake into the industry, and I think you've got to have the software and the applications to go with it. But I would still caution, I heard in an earlier presentation here that we're still in the early stages. I don't think we're in a lot of widespread adoption yet because we still haven't caught up, I think, on the hardware and software front.
Actually, let me. I'm going to pick on you for a moment.
Okay.
Because I think that something around the use of XR in food safety and with the NSF is something that most people, I'm willing to bet, don't really think about. I certainly hadn't really thought about it until I had the chance to meet you prior to this. So can you share with the audience sort of the kinds of things that you're introducing and the reactions that you're getting from people in terms of deploying augmented reality or mixed reality or VR within the field that you're in for collaboration?
Sure. The most immediate application, and it has its challenges with connectivity, is remote assist. So many people in the food industry travel to all points of the globe to ensure the safety of the products they source from all different countries. And it's not an easy thing to do, but to be able to have that instant connectivity back to the United States, Europe, or whatever is very strong. The other uptake we're getting in the food industry is around a training modality. Today, people have to go to different locations to get instructions. If you've ever been in a fast food restaurant, you see where they're going tethered to a computer screen somewhere where they're reading an order. Now I think the advances in technology will allow people to take the workplace with them. So those are probably two of the most immediate applications we see.
What's the reception been like in that industry?
They're early adopters of technology. It relates to the consumer interface. So, to be able to order, do your table, do things ahead of time now, the consumer interface has always been very strong. When it comes to what you call the back of the house functionality or the supply chain functionality of it, those have not been the early adopters. So I think to get out there, we have to find the right people that are the innovation specialists because it's not a mainstream avenue for technology.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Shannon?
Well, I think with the advent of hopefully millimeter precision GPS, that's going to be a game changer for the entire industry. Right now, we have to do we jump through a lot of hoops to do the tracking required to do successful AR, with fiducial markings or just overlays over objects. We just don't have that yet. And I think hopefully with the advent of Magic Leap, people will realize that it's not important to put all the compute in the headset.
What does the advent of Magic Leap mean?
Magic Leap got it. They understand that you need to put the compute elsewhere. You don't need a 5-pound object on your head. That's silly. I mean, it should be, this, glasses with a tether and have the compute down here.
Hey, those are Atheer glasses.
They are.
All right.
I'm going to use them as a prop.
We are everywhere.
Yes. And this is how it should be. This should be your AR glasses, right? But we're obviously not there at all. So I think that's what's preventing us from emerging from the magma level.
Can you share, I know your startup that you're at is stealth mode still, but is there anything that you can share with respect to sort of where your startup is looking to create some of those breakthroughs in this area?
It really has to do with heavy industry and large plants and it's standard see through the walls kind of AR requests and things like that. There's a certain amount of see what I see where you can tap in. You're looking at a confusing project and it comes to an expert somewhere else in the world that can give advice.
Right.
So that's kind of standard things, but all in one place, hopefully.
Right.
So.
Elizabeth, how about in the world of Cisco? You see a lot of things, I'm sure, as it relates to
We do indeed.
new technologies.
When it comes to barriers, a lot of it goes down to the friction that is there for adoption. So I think we have become so used to things like these devices, and they work so simple, and the user interface is so easy, and we've gotten so used to it that now the expectation is there that I don't want a clunky model. So even though a lot of the hardware is still in beta version, early versions, we're much more impatient. So because of that, I see it as kind of two sides of the same coin. On one hand, there's still the advancements we need around the hardware and the software. And the other side is the user adoption of that. But as one is going to get better, obviously, then the other one will as well. Because as we get more and more comfortable with the frictionless of, oh, this is simple, this is easy. I put on my glasses, like Shannon was saying. It's just like putting on my sunglasses. And the rest of that, click here, adjust this, that kind of falls away. I think you'll see the adoption just take off much faster.
So the ergonomics and sort of human-centered design.
Making it simple.
Okay. So Shannon, I noticed you do have a pair of AR glasses there. What is that?
Yeah, I worked for the CTO of HP for a number of years, and kind of the way we invented the future there, or at least that I did, being the tip of the spear, trying to figure out what's next, is doing sort of thought experiments. And I wanted to do a thought experiment with you guys today about remote collaboration with using AR. And so the scenario I wanted to lay out was, pretend you're, and I'll stand up since I'm hiding behind the box here. So pretend you're at the grocery store, and I'm looking at the aisle here, and I'm supposed to buy some shampoo, and I don't know it's on the list, but I don't know what it is, so here I go. All right, so this thing doesn't always listen to me, but when I tap, it listens to me. Dial wife. Ring, ring, ring. Oh, hello? Hey, honey. Do you see what I see? So now it's listening to me. It heard me say, see what I see. It activates the pass-through camera, and now she can see on her screen what I'm looking at. I'm like, you told me to get shampoo. I don't know what the heck shampoo to get. What do you think? Oh, okay. Three-way call hairdresser. Ring, hairdresser comes on. Do you see what we see? Maybe that's a variation of the words there, the key phrase, but do you see what we see? So now she's seeing it. Okay, I'll pick this one up. Okay, no on that one. Okay, that one. It says Rogaine. Okay, that's the one to buy. Okay, I got you. Okay, terminate call. So, remote collaboration, simple, low-hanging fruit, no machine learning necessarily, but why don't we have this already? The technology's there right now. So, that was the point of this prop.
Okay, got it. So
and
you
it's
mentioned
ODG, by the way. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, no, ODGs are great smart glasses. So you mentioned machine learning, which touches on other things that swirl around with AR, dance partners like machine learning, like blockchain, and AI, IoT. So I'd be curious to get your perspective on the role that these other monikers play in the evolution of where we're going with remote collaboration in XR. Ryan?
Yeah. No, I think machine learning is going to play a huge role in how people interact with AR in the future. When the camera's on, and we're using it to overlay information, but there's a huge opportunity to also consume information and to learn. So I think the more and more we can do that, so for our use case, we have home service professionals, hundreds, thousands of them, streaming. And we're documenting as much as possible with being concerned about privacy as well. And we're tagging these photos. We're having the pros tag the photos because we want to learn what issues are coming up, how are they solving these issues. And since they're using AR to interact with the environment, they're actually showing us points of interest. So now we've got these tagged photos. We're starting to learn about the issues, how they're solving them. And eventually, what we believe is that you won't always need to connect to a professional. Initially, you'll have maybe an AI that you interact with, It will know the top, 40 to 50% of issues that come up, and it will know how to solve those issues and walk the consumer through that before they have to connect with somebody. So I think it's going to be really exciting what it can do for remote collaboration.
Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at Cisco we focus on, we have AI efforts and XR efforts and IoT efforts, and I get that question a lot. What do I see the future of collaboration specifically looking like in 5 years? And the best way I can describe it is alphabet soup. Basically going to take all these acronyms that we're currently talking today, and they're all going to converge into one single experience. Right now we're focusing, we have this whole conference on XR, but XR isn't a thing. I would argue it's not even a platform. It's basically a computing paradigm shift. So it's going to become foundational. So looking ahead, we want everything's going to be XR enabled, and when you're talking about AI, of course I want everything to be smarter. I want the most intelligent version of it. I want remote assistant, artificial assistants added information into my experience. And then when you're talking about IoT, I mean, of course I want everything connected too. So I want it all. I want AI plus XR plus IoT. And I think that's what the future is going to look like when you start seeing those not being so much siloed, but starting to complement each other in one experience.
Mm-hmm. Tom?
And I would agree the same thing, especially when I look at blockchain. It's just, for the food industry, it's a next level of traceability, but I think all of this is intertwined. We're also under the machine learning seeing a lot. There's a lot of document review today, but you're looking at a lot of information to extract very little amount of content and points that are actionable. And I think machine learning is going to play a big part of that process. We're experimenting with it right now where for ISO certifications, there's a high level of document review involved with, regardless of which ISO discipline you're in. But to be able to do that through machine learning to where you don't have the time involved to sort out what you need in the documents. And quite frankly, a machine is going to be a lot more consistent at doing that than a human will be.
Shannon.
I actually have a point to make about machine learning, specifically as it relates to AR. And that has to do with the effectiveness of machine learning is the number of samples you have. How many people have held up their hand that says number 2, and I need a small hand and a big hand and a hand like this and a hand like that. Everyone has their own, and each one of them has to be tagged. That's 2, like manually in the beginning. This is how you develop machine learning models. Now every company in their way of thinking is they keep this again in a walled garden. They have their own machine learning models. Why do we not work together as an industry to develop this vast library of machine learning recognized objects? For instance, the speaker over there, the TV right there, the chair right there, something that we can all share as an industry. Then we will all grow exponentially, as opposed to everyone having their own machine learning libraries that no one else can access. So I would like to see sort of a more open source machine learning library of things.
What do you see as the biggest barriers to that vision?
Greed. Yes.
In what fashion?
Well, I mean, I developed this library. I'm, HP. I've developed this library of what all my computers look like, all my models look like. Why would I share that with the rest of the world? Mm-hmm. I get there's a certain amount of cost involved to do it, but I think it's much better if we can all share a database of machine learning models.
Mm-hmm. So let me turn it around for a second, and we've been talking sort of aspirationally and opening the aperture and what's possible. Let me flip it around and say, what is the thing that scares the bleep out of you, right? What's the thing that keeps you up at night as you think about the technology that you all are advancing within your organizations? What are that? Or maybe you all sleep really well, I don't know, but Tom, do you want to?
Well, it's actually, I think looking ahead, just getting over those initial hurdles of having, better hardware, better software, because quite frankly, when we tell people just to experiment with it now, don't take the big leap, it's because there's not a lot of confidence in terms of things that we do. When we look ahead and look far out there, I heard a couple of years ago, you look at, we talk about machine learning, we talk about artificial intelligence, and you look at what DeepMind has done and the capabilities around technology like that, and when they ask you...
Why don't you elucidate DeepMind in case
Okay.
some folks
It's
don't.
it's a company out of London that Google acquired a number of years ago that, the thought was, could ever a machine outthink a human? And there's a game that's played frequently in Asia. It's called Go, I believe is the name of it, yes. And essentially, unlike checkers, chess, where you have a certain number of moves, there's an infinite number of moves that require strategy. So the thought was we were 8 to 10 years out from ever having a machine, kind of like Watson did in Jeopardy or some of these things, that could ever outsmart and outthink and outstrategize a human. Well, 2 years ago, it beat the master champion out of South Korea in like 4 out of 5 matches. So it was like, okay, we're entering this age of a transition to where now we are capable of producing machines that can think and act better and stronger than a human can. So, you know, when you hear what starts to keep people up at night, that's one of the stories that always seems to come to mind.
Ryan, what keeps you up aside from running a startup?
A lot. No. I think for a lot of startups, it's staying focused and doing something that's really simple. With the device, I've been, you know, the first one to say that the devices aren't there yet, whether it's handheld or wearables, but we will get there. I think for us, it's doing as little as possible and still providing real ROI. I think with the devices that are in our pocket, we can provide an experience that saves companies a lot of time and money, and it doesn't have to be really fancy 3D models. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to track the whole world and make a mesh of the world. It could be something as simple as a laser pointer, just pointing, saying, in a remote collaboration scenario, saying, hey, this is a point of interest. Tools like that can help drive efficiency, faster resolution time, up to 30 to 40%. So for us, it's really staying focused and not trying to jump at all these shiny objects and anchors and mapping the world, although that's what we want to do. Yeah, I think it's just staying focused and doing something simple.
That's great, right? I think staying focused is really key. But what prevents somebody from being, if it's so simple, then what prevent, and we have all been talking about see what I see being a low-hanging use case. Certainly at Atheer, that's one component of our platform as well. But if you're trying to simplify things too much, then how do you figure out where the market is going to go when you have big companies like Cisco that have been in this space and they have WebEx, right? And then you have Microsoft with Skype. Like, if you're going to focus on a single point of entry, for example, as a startup or as an innovation group within, like, how do you find that balance?
That's a good question.
This wasn't in the prep questions, by the way, so throwing him a curveball.
I think the user experience needs to be really simple. We have a lot of complex compute in the background. For our pros, they have a couple of tools. They have a laser pointer, they have a 3D arrow they can anchor to the real world, and then they have a camera icon. They're very familiar. The camera icon takes a picture, but in the background, we're running it through our system to pull out things like serial numbers, model numbers, depth data for remote measurements. So when I say keep it really simple, it's on the user experience side mostly. There's still a lot we can do in the background and stay with the bleeding edge of technology. And I think that's really important because we want to be there when glasses are ready and consumers are going to adopt them. We want to have market share in the consumer space for the home services space. And we want to be the first people on smart glasses at that inflection point.
Cool. Elizabeth, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Right.
So yeah, it's usually one of them.
Question
Yeah, moving on. Regarding the experience itself, the thing that concerns me the most is making it simple. And I think the example that Shannon was just showing of you're in the supermarket, you do a 3-way call, you see what you see. In theory, that's a very simple experience, but in reality, there's a lot of complicated things that need to work right for that to happen. And just a matter, did I say the right phrase? Is it picking up the background noise? Are they seeing my same field of view? And there's so many little pieces along the way that unless that is perfectly aligned and perfectly seamless, the average end user is going to say, this is too complicated, why would I bother? So that's what I find concerning about when are we going to hit that point that it's just going to explode. And there's a lot of pieces that need to fall into that to make it a seamless, frictionless experience.
So at Cisco, are you, with the different groups that you have around IoT, AI, I'm curious to learn to whatever extent you can disclose, of course, in the forum, are there efforts of kind of bringing those groups together to run some whether it's POCs or pilots? Like how are the different groups coming together within Cisco to prep for that moment when things do start to grow?
I think like most large companies, we are structured a little bit in silos in that we do have a group focusing on AI and a group focusing on XR and a group focusing on IoT. But we're seeing more and more initiatives that are spanning those, in that we've been doing a lot of brainstorming, a lot of prototyping, a lot of pilots looking at the future of saying, we know these worlds are going to converge. Maybe not sure exactly on timing, but we know it's all going that direction. So starting to take those efforts now to define what is that, I'm in the collaboration organization, so what is that collaboration experience of the future? What does that look like? And there's a lot of cool things we're working on that I can't talk about yet, maybe next year. But yeah, definitely looking at the convergence.
Okay, Shannon, what keeps you up?
Well, you know, I'm on a working group for the IEEE, the AR, VR working group. And one of the things that we're trying to ameliorate before it happens is sort of like what data is transmitted and tracked. And so, you know, the day that I'm in the cereal aisle wearing my glasses and I'm looking at, you know, UPC and nutrition on the various cereal boxes there, and I end up buying, you know, granola. But when I go check out at the front counter, I get a coupon for Apple Jacks. You know, that's what I was actually really staring at for a long time, because that's really what I wanted. Like the moment that they're tracking my actual eyes gaze and using it for marketing purposes is kind of evil. So we want to, you know, abstract out any kind of PII, personally identifiable information, in the transport layer of the structures of data that will be going across. Somewhat JSON-like, let's say, but so Big Brother, yeah, Big Brother.
Yeah, I think that data, well, there's been a lot of news, obviously, and a lot of spam that's been going around now with GDPR, but I think that the concern over data is going to be obviously paramount, right, and what people do with that. But also data is incredibly valuable.
Right, but again, that's standards. We need standards in place, and, you know, open source, like people as a consortium thinking about this, all of our, you know, as a group, as an industry. So there's a lot of industry-wide initiatives that need to be in place to really move it forward, I think.
Tom, sounds like you have some work to do.
Yeah.
Have you guys been thinking about that, like creating standards bodies in NSF or?
Yeah, actually, we're a standards creator, and we've thought about that in the cybersecurity space for one, in terms of where that will ultimately go. And yeah, the whole GDPR is affecting everybody right now. We've just seen that, you know, since May 25th came around. There's just been a lot of activity there. And I think a lot of people are catching up, but I think that's just a tip of the iceberg in terms of the real life concerns people are going to have going forward.
Yeah. And one of the other things that I think we think about as well in enterprise is, as more and more enterprises are moving off on-prem into the cloud and remote collaboration, you start to share data, you start to share sketches of engines, you start to have certain pieces of data and information that flows through the system. How do you think that will be addressed? Is there going to be sort of somewhere in the middle of a private cloud that meets that, or is edge compute going to be the answer? Or I don't know if this is anything that, Shannon, and I'm sure this is something that you've thought about.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you definitely need edge compute. You definitely need edge servers too. I mean, there is no concept of an encrypted, do you see what I see right now, for instance. It's going to add too much latency to the issue there. So maybe onboard chips in the device that will encrypt the things before it gets sent to an edge that gets propagated out to the rest of the network. But you know, you have to always be concerned with latency. And remote collaboration of sharing drawings and doing things like that, you know, there's very little in the way of encrypting that at this point. We just want to get it to work first, you know. Then we'll worry about encrypting it and securing it. But it's definitely an issue.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so with each of you seeing and being responsible for the ways that you enable the remote collaboration to take hold in the market and in your organizations, I'd love to hear what are some of the things that you've been coming across, whether they're startups, so if you're with a large enterprise, some startups, or if you're a startup, are there initiatives being taken by large enterprise or corporate venture? I'd love to hear some of the things that you've been noticing, whether it's because it's admirable or because it's surprising or otherwise. Any comments around that? Tom, do you have any? example?
Well, that was kind of a good example is probably at NSF, because what we did is when we first ventured into it, the remote collaboration, we saw there were tremendous internal use cases, but we saw that, we've got 30,000 customers in the food industry, and we're like, they haven't started down this path either. So we created a startup within our organization called I Succeed so that we could take it out from, to our customer base and not just as an internal application. So that's one way of approaching it in terms of how you take it to market and have broader use cases.
Can you elaborate on a little bit more about what the venture, like what that process was to get the venture up and running?
Mm-hmm. Essentially what we did is when we first started into the remote collaboration, we saw that there were a lot more use cases. The things I mentioned earlier, there was training. There were different ways that it could be used in different use cases. And we're like, we're not the only ones that have this need. The food industry needs the remote collaboration. The food industry needs this as a training modality. And it's like, why not use this as a vehicle to get it out and get more collaboration across the entire industry? And so setting up a separate entity was just a good way to do that, to get it out to the masses more quickly.
Yeah. What about you, Elizabeth? Any interesting things that have come across your radar?
Yeah, we're definitely focused, from our perspective, on the collaboration experience of the future. So just what I was speaking about a few minutes ago about the convergence of AI and IoT and XR, that's definitely of prime interest to us. I think as we're exploring that, a lot of the startups and partnerships that we work with, there's a lot of investigation of that future experience, but if you bring it back to the short term, the most compelling one is really what you see probably 90% of the use cases on the show floor are here around remote expert and how do you enable that field worker. I think there's a phenomenal amount of learning that we'll get just through that experience. And it's definitely the most compelling use case I see in the short term, and most of where our startup interaction is today.
Mm-hmm. Ryan?
Yeah, there's a really cool startup actually that I just came across called Roomy with 3 O's. There's a big problem in the space about digitizing assets or taking existing assets and making them consumable on mobile devices, so making them much smaller and being able to run on the devices that we have in our pockets. And Roomy's one of the companies that's taking that on. They're creating, probably out of any company, large or small, the most digitized assets. So they're, take furniture, you name it. There's large enterprise companies, large Fortune 100 industrial companies paying Roomy to essentially create all of these assets. And I think that is a big barrier to a lot of companies getting into this space, is because they want to be able to share these assets with their field engineers, their field techs. So yeah, they're one that I came across recently that I was really excited about.
Are they here? Do you know if they're on the?
They are. I don't know. They're not here. I don't think they made it to AWE, but they are in the Bay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Shannon.
Yeah, well, I'll just go over a couple quick little companies that are amazing with regard to collaboration. First of all, Big Screen. Hopefully everyone in here has tried Big Screen. I use it all the time to have meetings virtually. It's a VR thing, not really an AR thing. But it's amazing. You jump in, you're in a room, a theater like this. We can have presenters, we can have stuff playing up here. I can share my screen. Big Screen you got to know about. Another one that we had some interaction with is called WorldViz. WorldViz is also similar to Big Screen, but it's more like where you can set up sort of a PowerPoint of states of presentations. So we can all meet in a room. We can all talk about the first design of a thing. We can pick it up, hand it to each other, 3D objects, pull in a PowerPoint, look at the PowerPoint. It's like, okay, let's go into the next subject. Boom, and we jump into a next room all together, and we watch a brief video from the chairman or what have you. So definitely WorldViz is of great interest, and Big Screen, of great interest. But one of the things that, being in the industry as we are, we tend to know sort of where the edges are, what's missing. And one thing I would really like to see being built up that does not exist at this point is the ability to sort of mark up reality, to mark up things. Let's say I'm an AR guy and I'm looking at this screen and I want to draw a box around it and note the model, and I'm writing in the air or whatever I am. So this is a persistent thing that you put on your glasses and you can see as well. And you can see as well. Like we all go to a unified location to get this information. It doesn't exist just yet. Again, a standards like ARML, sort of like.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a big project. So we have a few minutes left, so I want to open it up to the floor to see if anybody has any questions or any burning issues they'd love to raise, whether for the panelists or for the other folks in the room. Oh, right. I have a terrible chair here. Going back to the witch shampoo example, Rogaine.
yeah.
You're right, we can do that today just by using this camera and FaceTime. Is it good because it's just hands-free?
Well, it's having an actor trying to think through a use case, keeping it simple, and working through obviously the shampoo is trivial and meaningless, but it may be, how do I fix this alternator? My car's about to explode, a much more urgent situation. But I don't know that you can three-way call on a FaceTime. I don't know that you can have, yes, definitely hands-free is valuable because you can operate the thing as you're talking and being told what to do. But yeah, it was just an example of a use case. That's just the way I think.
The simplicity of it too.
Yeah, I pick an actor, I pick a use case, and I become that actor and walk through the steps to get to hopefully a successful conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, also with that, if I can jump in on the use case you're talking about, the benefit of having that in AR is you can have information from who's the manufacturer, what's the price point, or price comparison to a local store.
Exactly.
You have all that information, which you don't have in
you can pull up nutrition information, ingredients, and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how much hair are you really going to lose in the next year?
Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Okay, so I think, Elizabeth, this one might be for you. Do you think traditional collaboration tools like Google Docs or SharePoint are going to adapt to XR? How do you see that going?
Our official answer is that we don't know. We have an effort at Cisco. It was formerly Spark VR. It's recently been renamed to WebEx Teams in VR, exploring just that, of taking some of our existing collaboration tools and putting it into a virtual reality environment. And it's a beta version right now. We're experimenting with that, of what's useful in an XR experience versus what's not. I think you'll see certain components of that shift over because there's more you can do in an XR environment, and certain ones where it doesn't make sense. 2D is fine. So I think you're going to see a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Okay. And then we have, do you see any interest from your customers or your market to support HUDs, or would they stay on mobile devices for adoption? Smart glasses or phones? Ryan?
Yeah, no, for us, it's the consumer space, so it's a little early for heads-up displays, so they'll probably stick with smartphones and tablets for now. There could be some niche scenarios where maybe a retailer, you purchase maybe a shed and they send a pair of glasses with you and with maybe Streem on it, and you can stream a professional to help you put it together, but we haven't gotten much pull yet from these consumer brands to...
Well, do you think like the Vuzix Blade will help break that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, what about you, Tom? Do you have any comments?
I think in the food industry, hands-free is critical. You need both hands to do your work and do your job.
And to eat the burger.
And to eat it too. So, to be tethered to a handheld device, I equate it to, you're walking around doing your job with one hand behind your back. So to be able to free them up through a heads-up display, I think is going to be certainly in the cards for the next evolution of devices.
Great, okay. Well, I think that's our time is up. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and especially for my panelists here. And if you have any questions for any of us, you can find us as we come off the stage. And have a great rest of the show, everyone. Thanks. And pick up a pair of sunglasses from the Atheer booth.
Great job, Rika.
Thanks, Rika.